Coming up today on the Cruise View, Quantum of the Seas has a tight squeeze into Barbados. Plus, we're going to take a look at the Northstar. And we'll find out what kind of environmental impact the Quantum of the Seas has on her destinations. It's all coming up, so let's set sail. Welcome to day 15 of the CruiseView's sailing on board of the Quantum of the Seas, and today is the 7th day of the second leg of this journey. And it was another port day. Today we were in Bridgetown, Barbados, the 4th of the 5 ports on this leg. And this morning we got in at about 8 a.m. We're a little bit earlier than that, but we were a little delayed on actually being allowed to depart the ship. And if you've never been to Barbados, it is a very tight squeeze to get in there, especially with a ship the size of the Quantum of the Seas. She is, of course, a very long ship, and in order to get into her dock, she had to pull in straight and then do a full 90-degree turn in order to be positioned to depart this evening. So it was a very tight little spin maneuver that she had to make in order to be positioned within the pier, with only a few meters from the bow and the stern while making that maneuver. So it was a very cautious rotation and a very slow one. But we eventually did get docked, and the Thompson Celebration was docked directly across from us in the little harbor area. She was there when we arrived. She remained there when we left. I'm not quite sure what schedule she's on at what her arrival departure, or if it was a home port day for her, but she was there much longer than we were, at least. And if you've never been to Barbados, it is a very long pier, but they do have shuttles, so you can get off the ship, take a shuttle right over to the pier area and to little stores and get your excursions all from over at the terminal area. So even though it is pretty long distance, you don't have to walk, and the shuttles are complimentary, and it seemed like there were plenty of them, so I don't think there was really much of a backup as a result of that. But we did have mostly great weather today, which is a good thing as always. And the weather was sunrise at 6:16 a.m. with a beautiful sunset at 5:34 p.m. just after we had left for the day. We had a listed high of 82 degrees, but as of noon at least, when I checked on the stateroom TV, it already listed 88 degrees, so I'm sure we probably hit just into the 90s today. And there was one shower in the afternoon, but I don't think it actually reached the ship. I'm pretty sure the ship itself remained dry the entire day in Barbados. The winds were about 5 knots, which wasn't too bad. It was a pretty calm day and very hot with that sun out there. And we had smooth seas sailing in, as well as more smooth seas tonight, so it's great sea conditions today as well. So as for what I did today in port, I spent the morning on board, enjoying the ship. It was incredibly empty. It seemed like almost everybody chose to go out to the port, and today was a Sunday, so normally all the stores are closed in Barbados on Sunday, but they chose to open up for a combination of things. The fact that the Quantum of the Seas was here for the first time, but also it is the Christmas season, and I think in Barbados normally things are closed on Sunday, except during the Christmas season they tend to open up a little more. So I'm not sure which factor was the bigger decision maker, but they were open today for the most part in the port area. And with everybody off on shore, that meant that Northstar was completely empty. So I was able to get on the very first ride today, and it was only half full. They gave an option to get tickets and come back later, but I really don't know why anyone would do that, since you could just walk up, get right on. I actually don't know that I ever saw a full ride go, so it was the first time, I think, in the history of the Quantum of the Seas that Northstar was actually accessible to anyone that wanted it. And of course, if you were in the ship and went up in Northstar, you got an incredible view of Barbados from up there. 300 feet above the sea level. Absolutely stunning sight. And today was also the day they held the crew emergency drills on board the Quantum of the Seas. So in the morning, they of course sounded the alarms, and all the crew had to get to their muster stations and go through the full lifeboat drill, lowering the lifeboats, testing them out, and then reloading them onto the ship. And of course, you can check out the entire video that I have posted to see a little more on what exactly they did. Watch that full loading and unloading process unfold. But later this afternoon, I did have an excursion scheduled. I took the 4x4 and Green Monkey excursion, and it's pretty fun. We got to take a ride all the way around the island, got a lot of great sightseeing, a lot of great places to look out and see the ocean. Unfortunately, right as we got near the monkey sanctuary, the downpour started, and it lasted until a couple minutes after we left the sanctuary. So it was basically just the entire time we're at the sanctuary it poured today. But we did get to see a ton of monkeys, so if you were considering that excursion, you do in fact see them. You go there right around feeding time and all the monkeys just come running out. So there's tons of wildlife, the monkeys as well as others to see. So it was, even in the rain, an enjoyable excursion and one that I would recommend other people do. And as we got back to the ship, we were supposed to get in about 15 minutes before the all aboard signal at 4:30 p.m. We were a bit late. We actually didn't get back to the ship until about 4:45, 15 minutes before the ship was scheduled to depart. So they had to hold things for us and everybody else that was on our excursion. But as soon as we pulled into the terminal, they already had somebody from the shore excursions desk waiting for us to quickly get us back to the ship and on board. So that was the first time I've experienced that, and it was very smooth. Didn't really seem too rushed, even though they of course were rushing to get us back on board. And then, as I mentioned, at 5 o'clock was the departure then, and it was a much simpler departure than the arrival. Since she already did turn around when she arrived, she basically just had to slide away from that pier a little bit, and then it was just a nice simple 90-degree turn to get out. She definitely did not get as close to the pier and the shore as she did in the morning, but it was still an exciting little period to see, and it was right as the sun was setting, so it was an overall beautiful sight to see. And then, as for our compass summary today, it was a port day, of course, which means it was a much emptier compass, not as many things going on, since there really weren't many people on board to enjoy those activities. But tonight, we did have a 9 p.m. headliner. It was Ed Alonzo, a comedy magician. He's been on a bunch of shows. He was on Saved by the Bell for a while as well. So he's certainly accomplished a lot in his career, and it was definitely an enjoyable one. It's a little interesting mix of some simple magic tricks, some jokes, along with a little bit of Carrot Top style humor. So it was an overall good show, a little bit out there. I'm not sure how well it kind of worked across all the age groups on board, but I personally did enjoy it, and actually it's been a while since I've seen a Royal Caribbean guest entertainer I didn't enjoy, so they're certainly doing a good job picking those, at least for my demographic. And then, along with the headliner, there were, I like to mention the game shows, so there were 2 game shows held today, and it seems like they're switching up how they do the games on board the Quantum of the Seas. Instead of it being one of the major events for the evening that you can go to enjoy, watch, and everybody on board sort of interested in it, they seem to be taking a filler approach with most of these game activities and using them to fill up a slot in the schedule. They're doing these games multiple times per sailing so that everybody can hopefully get to them. And today they once again had the Dare to Challenge game show at 1:15, as well as the Majority Rules game show at 9:15, both held over in a music hall, and both of which were already on this sailing at least one time each. So that's definitely a little bit of a different strategy, and we'll see how it works. That could be part of the reason why they are emptier, which is certainly not a good thing, so we'll see if they continue this practice or if they go back to using them as more of a major event in the evenings. I personally would prefer that. And then for our daily dine today, we're going to take a look at the Cafe Promenade. The Cafe Promenade, located directly off of the Royal Esplanade on Deck 4. It offers the traditional cafe experience introduced back on the Voyager class. It's a place you can go in to get yourself some coffee or tea in the morning and throughout the day and late into the night. They also offer a series of pastries and danishes for breakfast, as well as sandwiches throughout the day and into the night. And they also are one of the locations on board the Quantum where you can get some of their delicious fresh baked cookies. So, while the Cafe Promenade is no wonderland, it is certainly one of the places that a lot of people enjoy each day with its variety of different pastries and other items, especially its selection of cookies that are always available. And across the board, Quantum of the Seas has the best cookies no matter which venue you go to, including the Cafe Promenade, so be sure to get some of those while here. And for tonight's venue tour, we're going to go to Northstar, which I mentioned earlier. Whether at sea or in port, there is one feature that dominates the Quantum of the Seas like no feature has ever dominated a ship before: the Northstar. A massive crane perched on top of the cruise ship, it does what one cruise ship has tried, but no cruise ship has succeeded at before, offering guests the ability to see their own ships sailing. Located behind the forward mast, it features a 135-foot-long crane that, when not in use, rests across the roof of the indoor pool. At the end is a 7.1-ton glass gondola that features its own self-contained air conditioning and heating system to keep its occupants comfortable in all weather conditions. In addition to climate control, the roof has several instruments to detect the weather conditions, including wind speed and ship rocking, in order to trigger automatic safety systems that prevent it from operating in unsafe conditions. With a capacity of 14 people, 13 guests and 1 crew member, the capsule can hold a surprising number of people, but still has plenty of room for everyone to have their own section of window around the outside, while the center is typically completely empty. Being the first of its kind in the world, they've had to work through all the regulations involved in operating both an entertainment ride and a crane. As a result, she has 2 different modes of operation. While in port, if approved by the local authorities, she will operate a simple up and down operation in which the gondola is slowly raised to the vertical position, towering over 300 feet above whatever port of call she's in. After a few moments at the highest point, she'll then slowly lower back down to complete the ride. While at sea, they have more flexibility, and as a result, can perform a more complex ride. As it starts moving, the gondola will rise vertically partway before the crane begins to rotate about 45 degrees to one side of the ship, dangling the gondola over the side. This offers guests a view of their own ship sailing through the ocean like no one has seen before. After a few moments over the side, the crane will then begin to rotate back to the center position. Once vertical, she then lowers back to her park position to end the ride. With an always changing ocean and new ports of call throughout a sailing, the Northstar is able to provide continuously changing view and experience to the guests. That incredible experience, of course, means it comes with challenges to handle the demand. While ports of call offer more to see, they also lead to fewer people on board the ship. This means that Northstar can often operate on a first-come basis with no wait. Sea days, on the other hand, have been handled with long lines, daily signups, and even numbers. So it's best to check on board during your individual sailing to find out how it's going to be handled, as it could vary. While you try to get on Northstar though, directly under it and alongside the line is the Northstar bar on deck 15. Offering a similar menu to the other pool bars, It has a benefit of a better view with its ship top location overlooking the pool area. So at this point I've been on Northstar 4 times, all 4 in port in Cape Liberty, in Nassau, Bahamas, in St. Martin, and in Barbados now. I have yet to be on it at sea, so I've only had the up and down experience, but hopefully by the end of this sailing I'll get to go off the side and see that full experience. From what I can tell, it seems like they're not going out as far. It looks like in the original test they kind of swung to the left, went up, around, and swung off the right side. Now it seems more like they're going up part way and then swinging slightly out to the left and right before continuing straight up. So it's a little bit of a different process. Maybe it's just the perspective being on the ship, but we'll see, and hopefully I'll be able to experience that before the end of the sailing, and I think once I'm actually on board I'll be able to tell for sure if it is a different view than what people had seen in the past. And then moving on to our interview tonight, with all these different activities and new amenities on board the Quantum of the Seas, there's of course a bigger environmental impact. And so today we're going to be speaking with the environmental officer on board the Quantum of the Seas, Ernst.
On the environmental side, we do have a lot of innovation here on this ship. The wastewater purification system is probably my favorite here. It's like we purify the pee and the poop from 6,000 people. So every day I have to go and take a sample and bring it to my lab. It is so good, it's like you can drink it. This is from voyage number 4. It's by far my favorite vintage.
Show called Sonic Odyssey, which is really sound in its most basic form.
So today I am joined by Ernst, the environmental officer on board the Quantum of the Seas. Thank you for joining me.
Welcome, my pleasure.
And then as environmental officer, it's your job to ensure that the ship is operating cleanly. That sounds like a 24-hour job. So what are your daily responsibilities with that?
Well, basically on a regular day, I will get up in the morning, I will check that our systems are working, I will make sure that we are not polluting the air or the ocean, that our waste management system is working, and that all the technical equipment is up and running. And basically I will audit the different areas of the ship to make sure that we are in environmental compliance.
Okay. And then when asked what they want to do when they grow up, most children do not answer that they want to turn wastewater into clean water. So how did you get interested in this line of work?
Well, I guess my first cruise ship was like 30 years ago, and back then they had a terrible way of doing things. They were throwing everything overboard.
Yeah.
So even in pristine areas we went, I was working out on deck as a deckhand, and I was seeing that like every day they would throw hundreds of plastic garbage bags overboard, and there was nothing I could do about it. So back then I thought that I hope one day I will be in a position that I can do something with this terrible, it's like a environmental crime.
Yeah.
And then later on I was working in this company, and many of my friends, they were environmental officers, and I would say I took deep interest in this line of work, thinking about the past and really a lot of interest. So many of them, they let me work with them, cross-train, and I did a lot of cross-training over 3-4 years. At the same time, we got internet and computers and internet on board with internet access, and I started to do a lot of online studying, environmental management, waste management, chemical management, workplace safety, stuff like that. So I was doing this for a while, and then it didn't go under the radar. So one day the company asked me to come to the corporate office and for a series of interviews, and shortly after I was promoted to environmental officer, and they sent me to Alaska, to the Radiance of the Seas.
And the Quantum of the Seas is the latest and the cleanest ship. So how did you end up working on her?
Well, after the Radiance, I had 2 very successful years on the Radiance as environmental officer, and after that I was looking for more challenges, and we had the Freedom class coming. So when I asked them if I could join a new building, they let me participate in the startup of the Freedom of the Seas, and which was also very successful. And after that, I also did the setup and opening of the Oasis of the Seas, and then I stayed there for 5 years.
Wow.
On the Oasis. And then when the Quantum class was coming, I let the company know that I had interest in moving forward, and then they sent me here to open up the Quantum, and then the Anthem after this.
Okay. Then the Quantum of the Seas is a brand new ship. So what extra procedures were required to ensure that she was up to standards?
Well, when you set up a new ship, there are a lot of challenges. First of all, we're still building a ship. When we come out, there's always some delay, and we have hundreds of contractors on board. And one of my biggest challenges is mostly waste management. You have so much waste on board, construction waste, hazardous chemicals. All the crew are new to the ship. They have to be trained in environmental duties, every single one of them, 1,600. And so those are very big challenges, and all this has to be dealt with before the ship comes into operation.
Yeah. And the ship carries nearly as many passengers as the Oasis of the Seas, but with a smaller footprint, allowing her into smaller, more delicate ports. What extra procedures and precautions do you have to take in order to ensure that there's no unnecessary impact at those ports?
The environmental impact on a port, it has 2 sides. You have the impact of the tourists, our guests, and then you have the impact of our operation. So, evidently the first one I cannot control, but that's more done by the tourist organizations in the different ports and our shore excursions and stuff like that. The second one, the operation inside, would be anything from oil, chemical spills, solid waste overboard, runoff from our decks, and emissions, stuff like that I can definitely help to control. So those are the challenges. This company has probably heard about the Save the Waves program, right? Yeah. The Save the Waves program is ISO 14001 certified. Well, that means that all of our ships are very above and beyond compliance when it comes to environmental rules and regulations. So we basically, all Royal Caribbean ships are doing very well. And so the only advantage, I would say, here on the Quantum is that we have some technical equipment that the other ships still don't have. So that's the only thing I can think of.
So with so many new efforts and items introduced on the Quantum, will any of those items be carried back to the rest of the fleet?
Well, the emission gas cleaning system, that will definitely be implemented on all new ships, and then also retrofitted on all the older ships also in the fleet. So that's required to keep the sulfur limit standard meeting regulations in the future. So that will be carried over. We also probably heard about the air lubrication system.
Yeah.
That would probably be good, but that could be difficult because to retrofit the old ships, you would have to perforate the hull. So I don't know if I'm going to do that, but for future new buildings, for sure. Because this is saving us an enormous amount of fuel and energy.
Yeah. And then the Quantum of the Seas has the latest and most advanced emissions filtering system on board. What does this process entail, and are there ever times that the ship adjusts how well it's cleaning the emissions?
Are you referring to the emission gas cleaning system, also called the sulfur scrubber?
Yes.
It works in the way that it's a hybrid system, so we can run it in open or closed loop. when we run it in open loop, the ship is at sea, we pump in seawater, and then up in the chimney, there's a 16-meter tall stainless steel tank. It's called a scrubber tower. So we are pumping up like 20,000 gallons of seawater a minute, spraying the emission. So when the alkalinity, the alkaline seawater hits the smoke, it creates sulfuric acid, and it neutralizes the sulfur in the exhaust. So when the emission comes out, it has less than 0.1% sulfur. So we're meeting the new high standards worldwide.
Then the Quantum of the Seas is headed to China in the future. And with that, it's going to have a whole series of new ports and locations that it has to visit. Are there any extra measures that have to be taken in order to ensure that she's compliant with these new locations?
Well, that's more done from our corporate office. We have a division called itinerary and deployment planning. So there's a group of professionals. They will meet with the government and organizations in the different ports and present our project and then make sure that everything is fine and setting up all of our future ports. Also on the environmental side, there's some stuff that has to be done from our side, like planning of waste management, waste landing in the different ports, and so on. Also the itinerary itself, when we are sailing through some pristine waters on the way to China, and some places have higher requirements than other, and as an environmental officer I have to make sure that we meet all these requirements like on a day-to-day basis. So I have to do a lot of itinerary planning with a navigational officer to make sure that we are in compliance.
Okay. And then before we go, is there anything else you'd like to tell the viewers?
Well, I would, for all environmental conscious cruisers, I would definitely invite you to the Quantum of the Seas, because this ship is more environmental friendly than any other ship in Royal Caribbean or in the world. So we are saving probably 20% more energy than our most environmental friendly ship so far, which is the Oasis class. So as per passenger per cruise day, you are much more environmental friendly here than on any other ship. So please come and cruise with us.
All right. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
So once again, I want to thank Ernst for taking the time to talk to us about all the different environmental aspects of this ship. It's always one of those big aspects that nobody has to think about. We really don't care what the environmental impact. We're on vacation, but it is one of those important things. We're going to see all these beautiful islands. We don't want to see them polluted. So even if it's not something that concerns us, it is something incredibly important to us. So that about does it for another episode of the Cruise View. And coming up tomorrow, we're going to be in St. Kitts, the final port of call on this entire Cruise View sailing. So be sure to check out that one. And of course, as always, I'm Picone, and stay tuned for the links.